Hi, everybody. It is September 6, 2021. Americans have fewer friends than they did 30 years ago. What's going on? What's happening to us? Now, I understand that this is happening in all Western nations, but I'm American, and I kind of focus on what's happening in our country because I am not in your country and there's nothing I can do about what's going on in your country. But clearly, there's nothing I can do about what's going on in mine, except bring to the attention that each individual American needs to do work on themselves. And if they don't, we will be manifesting a darker and darker reality. And that reality is just exploding, getting worse every single day. Yes, everyone is involved in the reality that manifests in every society. Every individual in that society helps to manifest the reality. Our reality, very dark. And it has been dark for a long time. But a whole lot of, it's like that ripple effect, right? It reaches out and it touches everyone. Eventually, the societal decay, the betrayal of the social contract, the loss of humanity, compassion, care. I just read some good articles about the cruelty in America. And it's, and as I'm reading, I'm thinking to myself, why is it so hard for people to recognize the truth? Okay, it's hard to recognize the truth about your own self. But it's easier to recognize the truth about the collective self that you are involved with. Why do people persist in maintaining a delusion that we Americans are somehow great? We're not, and we haven't ever really been. We could have been. We could have been. Not that the individuals in that society are great, but what was handed to us was truly a gift. We didn't protect it. We just took it for granted that it would always be there, and yet the changes were taking place all the time. It was easier to ignore what was happening than to face it. And unfortunately, we did become incredibly self-centered, cruel, and does it surprise you that it's getting harder to have friends? Yeah, friendship means you have an obligation to the person. You do not lie to them. And you also lift them up instead of punching them down. And that was what the article was about in terms of the cruelty in America. We don't lift one another up. We punch each other down. And that has become a common practice that a whole lot of Americans just seem to embrace as if it's normal and as if it's good. It's not. So if you let these things continue, it's like that, spider web. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it begins to engulf everyone. And if you don't resolve the problems, and this is true for individuals as it is true for the collective in a society, if you do not resolve the problems, they only get worse. They continue and they get worse. That's where we're at. But the disconnection, most Americans aren't even connected to their own self. So if they've not done that work, which a whole lot of people, just want to say, they poo-poo it. That self-reflection, learning from one's experience, and striving to be a better human being in one society, you're looking at the downfall of that society. If you continue to be a self-centered person, then that self-centeredness begins to develop into a pathological narcissism. And that's what has engulfed us as a people. But if you're not connected to your own self, and the only way to get there is to do that work, the self-reflection, you cannot connect to other people. It will not be an authentic connection with another human being. And if you don't have that authentic connection with another human being, then that relationship is not a significant, substantial relationship. It's not a substantial friendship. And it's one that you can easily walk away from, throw away. Certainly social media has done a number, because apparently it's the Gen Zers who are the most lonely. So, friendship in America is pretty much meaningless. Why the average American hasn't made a new friend in 5 years. But what I also want to point out here is these are the most important things in life. Friends, family, how you relate to one another. They're far more important than money. Not that money isn't important, but we put money first. And we don't even talk about this stuff. This is the stuff that either makes or breaks a society, and it's breaking us. America needs a chief friendship officer. This was just posted. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans have no close social connections, a double-digit increase from 2013. The author of Friendship in the Age of Loneliness says it's a crisis, and it is. America is suffering from a lack of friendship. The average American hasn't made a new friend in the last 5 years. Americans report having fewer friendships than in the past 3 decades. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans, no social connections. America lacks a social safety net. That social network that you have is your safety net. A whole lot of Americans have no safety net. Your family is your safety net. A whole lot of Americans, more and more, have no safety net. And you cannot exist as a society if people are just floundering about. So this all exploded with the pandemic. 40% of respondents ages 18 to 24 reported feeling sadness, distress, or hopelessness, as well as unwanted, strange, and obsessive thoughts. Chief Friendship Officer to work closely with the White House and the Office of the Surgeon General to integrate friendship and social connection into public policy. When I read something like this, I know we're done. Close the book on the American experiment. If you need a government, a section of the government, to implement public policy on how the people in that society can have friendship, something's very wrong with the individuals in that society, and it ain't going to manifest. But isn't that kind of Orwellian, considering how hateful Americans have become, how disconnected from one another, how the cancel culture and the SJWs are out having fits all the time, destroying people? And we're going to have a chief friendship officer? We are very sick and twisted. A national friendship strategy for helping people meet strangers in their neighborhood. Coming out of Washington, D.C. Okay. Make new friends, spend more time with their loved ones, and learn tools for empathic listening and bridging differences in our polarized nation. If adults can't do that on their own, then those adults need to work on themselves, need to ask those, difficult questions. Look in the mirror. Why? Why am I the way I am? Why am I abandoning family because they have different opinions? Why do I immediately shut down conversation because the other person is talking about something that I don't want to hear? Why am I like this? And then go a little deeper, but it's the continual asking questions of your own self that brings awareness to your own issues, and hopefully then one can resolve those issues and become a real friend. So, suicide attempts among adolescent girls surged by more than 50% in 1 year, this past year. Now, I mentioned this in my last video. I'm bringing this up again because this is not being talked about. It's never really been talked about for my 62 years. The most important discussions that Americans should have been having, still need to be having, are the discussions about what the hell is happening in our society that we have so many people killing themselves. What is happening in our society that we have increasing poverty rates? What's happening in our society that is making people feel as if they don't belong, they can't connect with one another? What's happening in the family? Why have Americans insisted on just laughing and then crying, and of course screaming about their dysfunctional families, but never do anything about it? Never work to resolve the dysfunction. Why have we let all of this go on? Why? Why are we lying to one another? Why do we lie to ourselves? Why do we accept lying from politicians, from our family, from our friends? What has happened to us that we insist on staying on the low road instead of trying to pick ourselves up? Because this has gone on forever in our country, the young suffer the consequences. Because each generation just gets worse. Something is terribly wrong in a society where the young, aged 12 to 17, but even younger, are killing themselves. The connection. Human beings need social connection. They need to trust one another. If that's gone, life becomes more and more meaningless. And you end up with a whole lot of young people wanting to kill themselves. But a whole lot of young people are also on those psychiatric medications that induce suicidal ideation. How could so many adults in a society put children on medications for being children? Because that's what we have done. We don't want to talk about this, but that's what we've become. Adults, parents, controlling their children via medication. We've allowed psychiatrists to get into schools, social workers to get into schools, like their little mental health clinics as well. Teachers diagnosing children who perhaps are bored and begin to act out. Oh, well, you have ADD. Let's put you on speed. We've ruined children. But that has an awful lot to say about who we are as a people. Why are suicide rates in the U.S. skyrocketing? I'm always amazed. Why? Gee, it's a mystery. When you value money over everything else, children especially feel that you're not valuing them. You put them in these indoctrination centers where they beat out of every child their own individuality, their own individualness, their creativity. Why? Coming from families that are so dysfunctional that they end up being adults filled with issues that they fling about, hurt other people, hurt themselves. Growing up in American society was really about, okay, I have this child, and this child needs to be programmed on how to become a material success, And to the exclusion of almost everything else. Now, there are some healthy families out there, but they are few and far between. They don't manifest society. It's the majority. It's that bell curve. The people in the bell curve. The socially dysfunctional Americans in the bell curve, the majority, manifest society. But when you see article after article after article and no one's talking about this, something's wrong. You know, we slap a yellow ribbon on our car. I support our troops. No, you don't. What you are supporting is the pretense by slapping a ribbon on your car, but you don't do anything to help them. Nothing. They become homeless. They come back with an awful lot of issues that they're judged for because of the trauma that they have been subjected to. Now, yeah, one would love it if no one signed up. Wouldn't it be fabulous to have a life in which you're living in a society where everybody knows exactly what's going on? They know all about the military. They know they're being shipped off to just destroy more nations, kill innocent people, and it's all for the elite and all for that military industrial complex and the military contractors to make an awful lot of money, and it's to take over the poppy fields in Afghanistan, and it's to take over the oil and the natural resources of the country. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone knew the truth? Well, they don't. So when people leave comments like, well, they enlisted, they're follow orders, they deserve everything that they get, the cruelty in our country is really, it's been hard to take. A whole lot of people enlist because they actually think that they are defending Americans and freedom. When they get over there, oh, it's not just the trauma of seeing, the bloody mess, the carnage, it's also the holy shit. What the hell am I doing here? Now I can't get out. The psychic trauma is no doubt the most. Physical trauma is one thing, okay, but the psychic trauma, that leads to a lot of suicides. A whole lot of people not understanding. Now, it's not that you need to understand, the details, but generally speaking, to get an understanding of what the individual is going through, whether they're a veteran or a child or anyone, that could lead to healing. But instead, we don't want to deal with it because we're self-centered, and we just want to have fun. So, go away, something's wrong with you. And then they kill themselves. We're all a part of this. And if you haven't reached a point in your own consciousness to recognize the ripple effect, to recognize that, yes, we are all connected. Yes. If you haven't reached that point, then you're a long ways away from reaching any kind of spiritual development. The nation's drug-related overdose and death epidemic continues to worsen. August 4, 2021. Why? Well, this past year we've destroyed an awful lot, millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of Americans. Destroyed them. Businesses, the door closed forever. Throw people out of work. Create and bring to individuals in a society the kind of stress that then becomes chronic, that they're freaking out. How do I pay my bills? How do I do anything when, well, my tyrants closed down society? I have no outlets. I have to stay indoors. I can't go out. I can't do this. I can't. People very often turn to drugs or alcohol to self-medicate. And then they die. It's a very cruel country. Americans are getting more miserable, and there's data to prove it. Well, you can check out the data. The U.S. has an empathy deficit. Well, yeah, we really do. Most Americans are not compassionate or caring. They believe they are. They put on a good show, but they're not. How you live your life, what you do each day, you demonstrate what you care about. You literally demonstrate your care by what you involve yourself in. We would not be living this mess. We would not have homelessness just continuing to skyrocket if we were a compassionate and caring society. We would not have so many Americans miserable, so many isolated, lonely. You know, the dots that people just don't connect, they don't connect them because they don't want to change, and it's easier to judge people and throw them away as opposed to trying to understand what is going on with them and then understand what's going on in the greater community and all of that stuff. But look, Carol, we vote for people to take care of these things. Aren't they doing a fabulous job? A shocking number of Americans have never experienced intimacy. This was back in 2019. Nothing has gotten better. My entire life, nothing has gotten better. Nothing in this country. Nothing. And that does not make us superior or exceptional. Those two things I always had difficulty with. Like, what makes us so exceptional? So, connection, intimacy, and it's not, we're not talking about a sexual intimacy. We're just talking about having close social connection that is meaningful. It was lacking when I was a kid. Wow, it's almost gone now. So, yeah, Americans are lonely, miserable, and depressed. The legacy of a society that has rejected family, faith, and patriotism. The faith part? Michael Schneider, I know, is a Christian. Well, a whole lot of Christians say they have faith. But what happened here? The majority have been Christian. The majority still are Christian. Christians do not manifest a very sick, twisted, cold, cruel society. So I think there's more to this than Michael is either recognizing or saying here. Family is a big part. The rejection of family. The dysfunction in family that has only grown, gotten worse, and yet still people don't do the work necessary to resolve that dysfunction and become healthy families. The family unit in the aggregate is a reflection of the greater society. It's a microcosm of the macrocosm. What you're looking at is a terribly screwed up society because of terribly screwed up families. Average person can't last 4 hours with their family over the holidays. Now, I have had a very different experience than all of my friends. I was never invited to anything. I don't exist in my family. So I would listen every single year to my friends bitch and complain about having to go, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever the holiday was, having to go visit their family. And then I would listen again when they would come back. And I thought, how odd. Now, their families were not like mine. Mine really is evil. Took me way too long to admit that. So they could still count on family. If anything happened, their family, or, I'm now thinking about my friends in my 20s, 30s, whatever. They could count on someone in their family. Some could count on all of their family members. But they had that kind of security. But the dysfunction persisted. No one did a thing about it. Every year it was the same thing. Every year. And I would listen. And I would, I thought it was really sad. Living my experience, listening to their experience. And I thought, wow, they have the chance, because there's still a connection there, they have the chance to make their families really good. Like, wow, I'm going to visit my mother, my father during the holidays. I can't wait. Miss them so much. I didn't have that chance. But they did. And they never did a thing about it. What happens to the greater society when that condition is within the majority of families? That society will not be healthy, and it will eventually fall. It will eventually disintegrate. That's what we're living now. Children cutting off their parents. How often have I heard this from a whole lot of you? Just read a troubling article, The Economist, how many American children have cut contact with their parents? Quite a few. Familial estrangement seems to be widespread in America. The first large-scale nationwide survey, recently conducted by Cornell University, found that 27% of adult Americans are estranged from a close family member. They might have some family. Some, now what I've been reading is a whole lot are getting abandoned because, well, they have a different opinion than their other family members. A lot having to do with the pandemic or politics. How sad is that? It means we are crippled. We've crippled our own self. The actual percentage is likely higher because relatives who are cut off, they don't like to talk about it. Most common family fracture is children cutting off their parents. There are a number of reasons. First, parents who divorce are more often cut off by children, with the father being the more common one, being knifed. Another reason is that the rise in individualism and personal fulfillment has taken its toll over filial duty, personal fulfillment, self-centeredness. Children who grew up in abusive situations are naturally less likely to stick with their families as they become adults. Therapy, too, often emphasizes the role family dysfunction plays in personal unhappiness. The research suggests that the habit of cutting off relatives is likely to spread in families. Expect more of this trend. Most immediately, for parents who are cut off, expect a lonelier old age. Wow, what a future we have here. You might have children, but they might not want much to do with you. What all this makes me realize is how lucky I am. My family is the most important thing in my life. Family is the most important thing in life. Family. If you have a healthy family, you will have healthy relationships in life. But if you come from dysfunction, your relationships will be dysfunctional. A whole lot of Americans don't ever go any deeper with their quote-unquote friends than just, okay, well, let's have coffee, let's go shopping, they stay on a superficial level because of all of the issues that they have inside their own self. Writing about it, The Economist, if you want to read, how many American children have cut contact with their parents. And for you, the subscribers who have left comments, your children cutting you off because you are simply trying to educate them about some poisons that they might not want to give their children, and boom, you're abandoned? Okay. I know that electromagnetic frequencies can do that. But I also know that if there is a dysfunction in that family is weak. It's not strong. The bonds are not strong. And it's become easier and easier for Americans to just throw people away. Like, even family. Even mothers, fathers, daughters, sons. And that is a reflection of Americans not right. And as they say in the South, you ain't right. The world views Americans as narcissists, and so do other Americans. I do. The world views Americans. Have you ever checked out? Have you ever tried to pull up some videos on YouTube, listening to those in other countries talk about this country, talk about Americans? It's eye-opening. See, when you're stuck in the sick system and you never pull back enough to look outside in, to look objectively from the outside, look in, that's when you begin to see, holy shit, we ain't right. So, what has happened? Well, psychology and social costs of isolation in everyday life. The loneliness factor. Loneliness in America. How the pandemic has deepened an epidemic of loneliness. And what we can do about it? Well, we need to change the way we live. And that requires each individual to do the changing. And that doesn't happen Everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. So we just keep doing the same old, and more people are going to be living miserably, end up killing themselves, or end up hurting other people, hurting other sentient beings. How social isolation is killing us. Loneliness and social isolation linked to serious health conditions. This from our fabulous CDC. Huh. Okay. Well, why did they implement such restrictive guidelines during the pandemic if they knew that what they were telling people to do would lead to serious health conditions? Because they've been saying they're keeping us safe. A report from the National Academies of Sciences, my God, Engineering and Medicine points out that more than 1/3 of adults aged 45 and older feel lonely, and nearly 1/4 of adults aged 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. Older adults are at increased risk of loneliness and social isolation because they are more likely to face factors such as living alone, the loss of family or friends, chronic illness, hearing loss. Loneliness is the feeling of being alone regardless of the amount of social contact. Not connecting in a significant, substantial way with another human being. Social isolation is lack of social connections. Social isolation can lead to loneliness in some people. Oh, good for you, CDC, that you actually have recognized that isolation and loneliness are not the same thing, but that isolation can lead to loneliness, while others can feel lonely without being socially isolated because you don't have any real connection. And the only way to get real connection is by being authentic in life, and our American way is a lie. We live a pretense. We put the mask on before we go outside our door. And then we just smile. Hi, how are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. Okay, then. Have a good day. Bye. Social isolation significantly increases a person's risk of premature death from all causes, a risk that may rival those of smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. So many studies on this. And I don't hear a peep from anyone talking about social isolation. Social isolation was associated with about 50% increased risk of dementia. Poor social relationships, characterized by social isolation or loneliness, was associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Our survival actually depends on we connecting with each other. Loneliness was associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, heart failure patients, nearly 4 times increased risk of death, 68% increased risk of hospitalization, 57% increased risk of emergency department visits. And this is what we did for over a year with the lockdowns. Why? How could this possibly, the lockdown, social distance, wear a mask where you hide your facial expression, which communication does not come just with words, body language, facial expression. Why did we do this? It seems that it was a backlash. For sure, it was a backlash. So, the self-isolation may save lives, but exacerbates mental health issues and loneliness. And I see consequences on a daily basis as a doctor. Millions of elderly and vulnerable people suffering from chronic loneliness are now facing further isolation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This will cause and exacerbate a different set of problems. Alienation of individuals from each other is particularly visible in big cities. So this doctor is in London, I believe, but not in the United States. But this is happening in every Western country. So alienation of individuals. Big cities, but it doesn't have to be a big city. I've seen it getting worse and worse and worse. Even in rural America. You don't know your neighbors anymore. You don't interact with them. You have no meaningful interact. Do you know their names? 3/4 of British people apparently do not even know their neighbors' names. And over half hardly speak with them. Loneliness alongside a lack of social interaction has negative effects, both physically and mentally. Social isolation increases the risk of developing heart disease, stroke, dementia, can be detrimental to physical health as smoking. Half of all over 75 years old live alone, and over 1 million older adults can pass an entire month in solitude. All right, I will link below to this, but loneliness is also increasing at the other end. It's not just the elderly, but at the other end. In fact, it's the Generation Z that is far more lonely than the baby boomers. Why is that? They grew up staring at their phone. They grew up socializing meant you're sitting in the same room, but you're texting one another. You're not looking in one another's eyes, talking, having, deep conversation. You text. That's how the younger generation grew up. We adults allowed this to manifest. So, yeah. Here he goes on talking about how there's an awful lot of people who end up in psychiatric wards due to anxiety and depression, and they have real fears when discharge comes up because they've been able to exist in an environment where they can talk to other people, and when they get discharged, they're right back into isolation. You want to read about what college students are going through? The isolation of last year? Criminal. It's freaking criminal. And all I did was just take out a little bit from each. But these are stories from either the parents or the students themselves, writing in their experiences with these lockdowns and what the colleges and universities were doing. The whole thing is a bait and switch. We're being forced to pay to attend Zoom classes in our rooms all semester. A few of my friends didn't even come back to town, and I don't blame them. If I knew when I was in high school that I'd be staying in my room all day, I would have never gone to any college. University of Alabama. You can read the university. But here, my guy and girlfriends are all miserable. So many have been like, this is prison. We can't do anything. Isolation dorms for COVID kids, but they are horrid. Guys in hazmat suits come. 2 weeks isolation, no visitors. Nurse on call, but up to a 3-hour wait if you need something. Kids at school now are not getting tested, so they don't get sentenced to the isolation prisons. Sign a health pledge. All students are confined to dorm rooms until COVID test comes back negative. No one is allowed off campus until at least September 15. This was last year. No visitors on campus all year. School has a Google form so that people can snitch on non-compliers. Town is terrified of students returning. This is in a county in Vermont that had 5 cases. Entire state had 55 deaths. They've canceled all fall athletic competitions. Students are back on campus, but most classes will be remote with, of course, a 3% tuition increase. Okay. Why? Why? Why have we allowed the manifestation of such a sick society that is treating people in a cruel, very cruel manner? Oh, it's to protect everybody's health? No, it's not. And it's obvious it is not. Not when those protections cause so many other problems. Students must wear masks outside dorm rooms, can't visit another dorm. We're permitted to organize a BLM march. Though, my friends and I have not gotten to leave our dorm to make friends. This is when they enter a world and they get to experience an independence like they've never had. This is when a whole lot make friends for life. College. We literally strip them of that and continue to strip them of that because it's not going away. All my classes are online. Though they are all online, I am still required to stay on campus, pay for on-campus housing, and buy a meal plan. Mental anguish and social isolation, they are forcing on our kids. Very depressing. Student wants to fight back but feels helpless, not knowing who may be reporting her actions. Very, very Soviet-like. College and University of Texas. It's all on Zoom. Even when there is no one around, you're supposed to wear a mask. In June, when housing deposits were due, they said in-person classes, no masks outside, no mention of tests. 48 hours before the students move in week was to begin, they changed all the rules. 48 hours before the students move in, they changed all the rooms. It's a dystopian hell. Obsession with keeping students away from one another. We are now forbidden to have any guests whatsoever. Who does this? It's prison. Very limited social interaction. If you do test positive, they force you into a hotel, alone for 14 days. Louisiana State University. Not allowed out of the room, save for 1 hour a day, with a mask on. Mandatory masking inside and outside. 2 weeks in, most classes have now switched to online only. Miami, University of Ohio, told to treat every person as if they are sick so that they don't get caught in a contact tracing web. So they essentially are being told to not interact with others, but were forced to live in double occupancy rooms, which now makes them judge everything the roommate does, because if your roommate is contact traced, you're forced back into jail. This is inhuman. It's prison, Virginia Tech, Syracuse. Entirely dorm room bound. All classes online. And it goes on and on. All crazy and sad. Kids are desperate to return to normalcy. Isolation breaks people. That's why they are doing this. That's why this has come about. So, the effects on your brain. People isolated even though they have people around them. And that's essentially how it was for me in in South Carolina. It was bearable, though, because I wasn't completely isolated. So the effects on your brain, it depends on the isolation that you are experiencing, and that's on a continuum because everybody experiences different levels of isolation. The elderly experienced an isolation that was so cruel, and some are still experiencing that. So the cruelty has exploded. But because that's become the norm, most just think nothing of it. Absence of human contact is associated with declines in cognitive function. We're a social species. We really need others to survive. We are seeing a real growing body of evidence that's showing how isolation and loneliness are linked in with incidents of different types of disease and with premature mortality. Social isolation is associated with increased risk of cognitive decline, dementia, mental health consequences, depression, anxiety. Here, 1972, a French adventurer and scientist famously shut himself in a cave in Texas for more than 6 months. He could barely string thoughts together after a couple of months. By the 5-month mark, he was reportedly so desperate for company he tried unsuccessfully to befriend a mouse. People routinely report confusion, changes in personality, and episodes of anxiety and depression. Decline in memory function. And there are so many effects that it's the distinction between objective and subjective measures of isolation, that's the continuum. We know that there's a difference between being physically isolated and emotionally isolated. You still have people in your life, but they're not meeting your needs. Different from being physically isolated. You don't see anyone. You don't have contact. Not everyone with limited social connections feels lonely, and some people with lots of social connections do. Some people might choose solitude without suffering particularly adverse effects. Loneliness is an inherently negative emotion, and when experienced for long periods, is often associated with depression. Loneliness is a discrepancy between what you want and what you have in your relationships. So I will link below, but the risk of social isolation, we are a social creature. I live, the neighbor here, when I have to go out, I have to pass a pastor. One horse. They had 3. They sold 2. They kept 1. 1 horse. 1. Horses are herd animals. I cannot look. I hear this horse whinny in the morning. It breaks my heart. But the people who have that horse are so disconnected. It's an object for them. They don't think about the life of the horse. There's so many animals that suffer at the hands of human beings. And human beings suffer at the hands of human beings. If you're treating a horse that way, then how are you treating human beings? There's a disconnect. You're not attending to the horse's needs. You're probably not even attending to your own needs or your family's, your friends. So the social isolation just continues to grow and grow. You know, and loneliness levels have reached an all-time high. 40%, and this was back in 2018. Cigna did a very huge study, but 40% of the participants reported they sometimes or always feel that their relationships are not meaningful and that they feel isolated. Lack of social connection heightens health risks. It's as harmful, or the study also found that loneliness and social isolation are twice as harmful to physical and mental health as obesity. Increased risk for premature mortality. Being connected to others socially is widely considered a fundamental human need, crucial to both well-being and survival. When we're not connected, and depending on how severe the isolation is that you're experiencing, you die. It does kill you. And with the increasing aging population of the baby boomers, the effects of loneliness on public health are only going to increase. Why? What happened to the family? When nursing homes came about, and I was a young kid, I knew it was inherently wrong. There was something so fundamentally wrong that adult children were putting their elderly parents into homes, not caring for them. That's when our population was healthy. Not everybody. It was the self-centeredness. I don't want to have to take care of you and let somebody else do it, because I don't want this intruding on my life. So, long-term impact of social isolation. The long-term impact, prolonged periods of social isolation can have detrimental effects on physiology and behavior of exposed individuals in humans and animal models. So consider the quarantines. Consider the colleges. Consider the nursing homes and assisted living, and considering what we are all doing to one another. You have increased blood pressure, C-reactive protein, fibrinogen levels increase, associated with an increased risk to being inactive, impaired cognitive function, poorer immediate and delayed recall, dementia, high-risk behaviors, smoking, drinking, drugs. The chronic social isolation can result in a complex behavioral response or responses characterized by increased aggressive behavior toward a submissive intruder, enhanced reactivity to foot shock. Well, this was a study with mice. But yes, your behavior changes, your psyche changes, you change, you begin to not even recognize who you are. Prolonged social isolation also affects different aspects of the brain. So the social isolation brings about terrific stress. And many of the findings of these studies, social isolation, what that does to the brain, they parallel what stress does to the brain. And yes, it promotes tumor progression. You have pre-existing conditions, they're going to get worse. They're only going to get worse. How extreme isolation warps the mind. When people are isolated from human contact, their mind can do some truly bizarre things. Why does the mind unravel so spectacularly when we're truly on our own? And is there any way to stop it? Whether you're conscious of the effects of the social isolation that you're experiencing, and it depends on where you are, that continuum, the scale. Whether you're conscious or not of what's happening when you are completely on your own, you know your survival has been threatened, decreased, because we can't make it on our own. It's bad for us. We're more vulnerable to infection because it affects our immune system, messes with our sense of time. It slows time. So, why can't we connect? What has happened to us here? Now, there's a lot of societies that still have connection. And a lot of those societies are not the English-speaking Western countries, but societies like Italy and Spain and Costa Rica and, a lot of their families are still intact. They grew up differently. Their families were the most important thing. So you have a lot of Mexicans and a whole lot in Central and South America. And I'm not talking about everybody. And I do think that there has been, this slow progression of dysfunction in those families. So, but they're still intact. We missed the boat, and we're just a materialistic people. Money is everything. Connection is a core human need, and we are terrible at it. Yes, we are. In a book, Lost Connections, Johann Hari talks about his decades of work in the fields of trauma and mental health, and why he believes that the root of almost everything we suffer through is severed connection we never figured out how to repair or never had in the first place, because parenting sucks in our country. Connection is the experience of oneness. It's having shared experiences, relatable feelings, and trust. Trust enough that you can actually share those experiences. The biggest problem in most people's lives is trauma, and trauma is what creates a damaged ability to connect with others. Trauma is not a term reserved for the most severe. That too is on a continuum. Some have experienced great trauma, others not so great, but it has an effect. But if you have experienced relational trauma with people, that may lead you to being far more isolated, lonely, not being able to connect. When people betray you over and over and over again, well, then you'll hear, "Oh, you have a trust issue?" No, actually. I have an issue with people who betray trust, and I'm a little tired of it. When it happens over and over and over again, not my problem, their problem. Stop putting the focus on the people who suffer the consequences of others who behave in such a way that leads to others suffering consequences. Anytime something scares us and we don't get over that fear, the trauma is working on your brain. Trauma wreaks havoc on the psyche and prevents reintegration into normal, healthy life where other people and unknown situations are seen as benevolent. And think about all of the kids living in homes that are just filled with traumatic experiences. They grow up as an adult, they're going to have damage, a whole lot of damage. And some may be permanently damaged based on how traumatic that household was. And we're never to talk about the parents and what they do, right? No. They get a free ride throughout life. Their adult children are broken, and they get blamed for what their parents did to them. Enough of the crap that I've listened to my entire life. You don't ever resolve a problem by ignoring it, by blaming the victims, by just giving a free pass to those who are creating the problems. The foremost pillar of happiness is a sense of belonging and purpose. Cultures that are more communal are healthier. We are not a communal culture. And it's not about individualism, the American individualism. It's about American sickness that, well, we just allow to continue on. It's about self-centeredness and greed. It's about lying and growing up, well, everybody lies, so Jesus died for our sins, so I can continue to sin. And we are basically a tribal species. There is no way around this, despite what many highly individualistic cultures may want us to believe. So, you grow up in a highly individualistic society, culture, you're sick. That it's the well-adjusted to a deeply disturbed society. No person is an island unto themselves. We are born through connection. And, excuse me, it is through connection to others that we accomplish virtually everything else in life. To know that someone has your back, it gives you a confidence to take risks in life. To know that should something happen to you in life, that you have someone to go to cry with, to get some solace, that they will understand you and won't judge you. Without that, you just get weaker and weaker and weaker as an individual as you live your life. We don't do anything alone. Nothing. No one makes it on their own in our society. We do not just prefer healthy relationships. We need them. Need them. Connection is so important, but it is often overlooked. Well, because we've decided to make obsolete the most important elements of life itself. So, for all of you who claim, oh, it's just the elite doing this to ourselves, I know that you are part of the breakdown, the disintegration of our society, if you can't recognize that we do this to ourselves. We do this to ourselves. Connection is the experience of oneness. It's having shared experiences, relatable feelings, similar ideas. It's the feeling of belonging to something greater than oneself. When you're watching a sporting event with your friend, okay. Hey, yeah, all right. You're watching it alone? Hey, oh, well, okay. When you gather with your family for dinner or open up and express your authentic feelings to another person and find you have something in common with someone, you experience connection. The digital age has severed connection, fostered inauthentic connection. It doesn't work. You cannot feign oneness by sitting on a couch while your friend is sitting on a chair and you're texting one another. It is not something you can intellectualize, it's something you feel. But when you don't have any awareness of your own self, you've lost connection with your own self. You don't even feel it. Authenticity is required for connection. We don't live in a country where people are real. We live in a country where people pretend. Their behavior is based on their need for approval. We're lost. We have become a very lost society. And there is no turning back. Most people believe a connection is something they earn by being good enough, when it is really something they develop by being willing enough to be vulnerable with one another. If our core human need is to connect with others, then the most important part of healing our emotional wounds is allowing ourselves to open up again. It is simply our willingness to show up as we are, and our trust that we will be taken care of, that we will not be judged, that we will not be thrown away for being real. And it is our discernment to give our time and energy to those who respect and cherishes it. And we have so many people who lie and walk the low road. They don't know who they are. They've never worked on their issues. Their issues are flung about. They hurt people. They lie. They don't accept responsibility. They don't. What I've noticed also, those who haven't lost things, their life is still relatively stable. They're still living, in their area that they've lived in forever. They're fine. They have the security. They don't need trust. They live dysfunction of their families, of their friends, whatever. But they've been doing it for so long. They don't need trust. As long as they're not thrown away and they know it, they can trust that. They don't work on themselves. They lie. They live a pretense. And they just go on. Those who have lost everything and have no one need to trust people. They really need to trust people. So when they're in relationship with a friend and they lie to them, you can kill someone. You can lead them to suicide. That's how important it is to be honest. We don't cherish anything here but our own little selves and how much money we have. And I'm speaking about the majority, not every individual, so don't get your knickers in a twist. It's too late for American society. It's not too late for you to work on yourself. It's not too late for you to do what is necessary to become a trustworthy soul for other people and have meaningful relationships. So, yeah, we are just, we've done this to ourselves. Sorry. Oh, but Carol, it was the social engineers. No, I was socially engineered. I was indoctrinated. I was this, I was that. But I also worked on myself. And I became a way different person and far better. Though I don't use that as, oh, wow, look at me. Because I will never be able to get rid of all of the issues that I have, not in this lifetime. Be real. You do that work, you can begin to manifest a healthier environment for your own self. All right. Look, it's very sad. I mean, it's tragic what has happened here in our country. Tragic. It is tragic. It's, the betrayal is so immense. It's so immense how we have betrayed one another. The links are below.